Hi, hello, how are you? Craig Chapman here, and welcome to Brutally Roll Your Own Backend, a short video series on writing your own low-cost backend for a Delphi application. This is part 3. We're going to get started on writing the PHP scripting for our backend, and in order to do that, we're going to need a PHP editor or a text editor. Now, if you have RAD Studio, then you could use HTML5 Builder. But since this video series is aimed at users using Delphi Pro with mobile as a minimum, we're going to assume that you don't have HTML5 Builder and take a look at some alternative options. So there is PHP Ed from Newsphere Software. I highly recommend this editor. This will allow you to do debugging on your code. It's quite similar to the older Delphi IDEs. You can use step through, step into for debugging and all that kind of fun stuff. However, this does come with a price tag, and the editor that I prefer to use for this is going to be Notepad++. So head on over to notepad-plus-plus.org and hit on the download link and get a copy of Notepad++. Okay, that's downloaded, so I'm going to open my downloads folder, and here it is, Notepad++. And if I hit yes on the security warning, we want this in English. Maybe you don't, maybe you want it in something else, but I certainly do. And then it's going to be next, I agree, next. Just keep hitting next until you get to install. These can stay as defaults and install. So this is installing Notepad++, an excellent free editor, which looks like this when we get the welcome log. So I'm going to go ahead here and enable one of the plugins. And if you go to the plugins, plugin manager, show plugin manager, the available plugins, which just listed up very quickly there, we're looking for NPPFTP, this one right here. So NPFTP will allow you to edit files on an FTP server or an SFTP server. So I'm going to go ahead and install, maybe I need to double click on that. There we go, to install. Yes, we can restart Notepad++, and I now have the FTP plugin. So what this is going to let me do is connect to our server, close some of these tabs, using, if I go plugins, NPPFTP, and show the NPPFTP window. That's a bit of a tongue twister. Okay, so that's going to bring out this little side dialog here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit on this little gear and go to profile settings. Okay, add new. And let's give this profile a name. Well, I'm connecting to Notifier, so I'm going to call it Notifier. The host name here is notifier.chapmanworld.com. Now, I'm going to set the connection type to SFTP. We haven't had to install anything on the server to get this SFTP to be running. And that's because this is a part of the SSH protocol that we've been using to connect to the server already when we connect through Putty. So basically, this is going to connect us to our home directory. So under username, let's put our admin user, and then I'm going to check ask for password so that I don't need to store a password, and close this dialog. Now if I go into this little connection icon here, Notifier has appeared, and if I click on it, it's going to ask me for the password to connect to our server. Okay, so click on OK, and do I want to accept the security key? Yes. And I'm now connected to the home directory of the admin user. But from here, I'm not able to edit anything on the website. So we do still need to log into Putty and make one or two changes. Let me bring Putty up here. So back in Putty, log into our server as Notifier as we did before. And I'm going to log in as admin user. And I've actually altered this password now, but this would have been brutally roll your own from the previous videos. And now I'm logged in. So what I need to do is create a link that allows me to edit files in our website. So I'm going to put in the ln instruction for link and -s, and that means that this is a symbolic link, so it's basically an alias for the directory that we want. The directory that we want is var www notifier. In fact, I'm not going to put notifier, I'm just going to put var www. So I want a link to var www, and I want to call that www, so that's the name of the link. Go ahead and run that instruction, and then back in Notepad++, if I hit the refresh icon, you can see that I now have a www directory, and that's because I created the alias to link to it. And if I open that directory up, we can see, let's make this a little bigger here, we can see notifier.chapmanworld.com. So this is our website, this is where we're hosting, and we have log, private, and public. If I take a look in public, there's our index PHP that we wrote last time. Now, if I try to create a file in one of these directories, let's try and create a file under private, create new file, test.php. What we should see is that it fails. And where is my error window? Let's see. Show messages window. So you can see here, unable to create this file. And the reason for that is we don't have permissions to edit this directory. So again, I'm going to switch back to Putty and correct that issue. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the directory to var www. So I'm here right next to the root of our website. And the first thing I'm going to do is make sure that the notifier, actually let's do an ls-lart. Yes, so here's the problem. Our website is owned by root. So what we need to do is make sure that this website is first owned by the www data user, which is the user that Apache runs as, and then we need to add ourselves as a user to that group. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say chown www-data www-data, and then I'm going to say notifier.chapmanworld.com -r, and I realize this instruction is going to fail because I need to run this as the super user. So I'm going to elevate to super user. Okay, and I'm going to issue the same instruction again. So chown www-data www-data notifier.chapmanworld.com -R. So what that's going to do is the capital R is recursive. So recursively, it's going to set the permission, the owner rather, on notifier.chapmanworld.com as a directory to use the www data group and to be owned by the www data user. So that's effectively saying that if I am www data, then I can work on that directory. Now the next thing that I want to do is set the permissions for the directory. So we're going to do a chmod, which is to modify the directory permissions, and I'm going to set 775 let's see, notifier.chapmanworld.com, and again I'm going to make that recursive. Now 775, you should certainly look up what the permissions mean, but for the moment 775 is going to give only the owner or members of the group www data permission to access files in this directory. So for write access, I'll have write access if I'm a member of the group. If I'm not a member of the group, I'll have read and execute permissions only. So anybody logging in through the website should have read and execute permissions only. Okay. And finally, I need to add our admin user to the www data group. So I'm going to say user mod -ag, so that's add to group, and I'm going to add, let's see, admin user. Actually, let's put the group first. www-data admin user. So I'm adding the admin user to the www data group. Okay, good. And now if I do a refresh over here and I attempt to create a new file, test.php, oops, I mistyped it, but nonetheless the file's been created. So that demonstrates that we're now able to create and edit files on our server. I'm going to go ahead and delete that since that was a mistake. Okay, apologies for the brief screen swipe there. I had an interruption, so let's kick back off with this. I'm logged in as admin user into my Putty session, and before we go ahead and build any PHP code up in here, what I want to do is create a database that we can connect to within our server. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to issue the instruction MySQL, and I'm going to give the options of -h for the host, and the host will be localhost, -u, what I'm going to log in as the root user, and -p. So that means I'm going to supply a password. I'm not going to do that on the command line. I'm going to let the MySQL instruction prompt me for it. Now the password will be the one that was given for the MySQL root user during the LAMP installation from the previous video. This was Brutally Roll Your Own previously, but I've since changed it. So go ahead and enter whatever password you gave for the root user. And I clearly got that wrong. There we go. Okay, so once you're logged into the MySQL terminal, we're going to start by creating a new database. And that can be done with the instruction create database, and then give the database a name. So I'm going to call mine notifier because I'm creative like that. Okay, so let's also create a new user with the instruction create user notifier. So we're going to have a user called notifier operating on a database called notifier. Now that we have a database and a user, we need to grant privileges for the user on that database. So I'm going to issue grant all privileges on notifier, which is the database, period asterisk meaning all tables on that database, to the notifier user identified by, and then I give a password for this user. Let's see, brutally roll your own. Okay, so now the user notifier, which can be accessed with the password brutally roll your own, has all privileges on the notifier database. Let's go ahead and exit out of MySQL, and we can exit out of Putty. I don't believe we'll need it again for this session. Okay, so we're back in Notepad++, and before we start connecting to the database, I'd like to explain what these directories are. So in the previous video, I told you that the private directory, that I would cover that later, and this is it. So essentially our website is being served out of this directory, this public directory. So any files within this public directory can be accessed through a web browser. Private lies outside of the public directory, so it can't be accessed directly by the web browser. The HTTP server is not serving that directory. So if I, let's see, rearrange my screen here a little for you. So we have notifier this side, and let's have a new browser window. If I browse to notifier.chapmanworld.com, oops, sorry, I made a change here to my file, so this is how we left at the end of the last session with the PHP info running up in here. So if I browse to /private, for example, it's not there because private is actually further up the tree. And if I go ahead and put in a relative path, the browser won't let me do that either. So although it's not a cast iron security system, it certainly offers us a level of security for the files in the private directory. So let's go ahead and see how we can use that information. If I go ahead and add a new file to the private directory, and I'm going to name this db.php, then this file now is where I'm going to put my database connection information. But for the moment, I'm just going to put some text in here. So I'm going to call it, I'm going to put in echo db.php, and then I'm going to put in the br HTML tag, which will break and give us a new line. Okay, so I'll save that file off to the server. And then in my index PHP file, we're going to take out what we entered previously. and we're going to take out what we entered previously, and we're going to enter in here an echo, and we'll say index, or let's make it pretty, let's say hello. Now what I want to do in this file is include the DB file. Now there are several include instructions in PHP. There's include, which will attempt to include another file. There's require, which will do the same thing but produce an error message if the file is not present or can't be included. And then for each of them there's a variant. I could do include once, and I can also do require once. Now, require once is what I'm going to use for the majority of my files here, because this is saying if I can't find the file, I'll produce an error message, and I only want to use the file once. So if I try to require this file in several different files, or several times in the same file, it'll only get included one time. Now I'm going to put in a relative path, so I'm editing index.php, which is in the public directory. So I'm going to come up one directory from there and go into the private directory and include db.php. So if I save that file now, if we're successful including the private db file and echoing the hello message, then we should see db.php and on a new line, hello. Let's go ahead and run that script. Whoops, I've still got private on there. And that's exactly what we see here. Let me zoom this in a little. So we see db.php and hello. Okay, great. So we now know that we can include the db.php file. So let's go ahead and put our database connection into this file. I'm going to put a new global variable called connect in here, which is going to be a new instance of the MySQLi class, which as its constructor parameters takes the host, local host, the username, notifier, and the password, brutally roll your own, for our database, and then a semicolon to end that instruction. Let's go ahead and alter these screen sizes a little so that you can see what's going on here. Maybe a little more. Good. So you can see that I'm creating a new connection to our database. That's a little bit more. And then I'm still going to echo the same message. Now if I go ahead and run that script, it doesn't appear to make any changes. And what we'll also add in here is a check that the connection actually happened. So we'll say if con method connect error. So this method is going to return true if there was a connection error. Then what we want to do in here is to issue die, which means that the PHP script will stop running, and we'll put out the message connection failed. And we're also going to add onto this, so we can concatenate onto this the actual error message, connect error, so that we give something a little bit useful as an error message there. Okay, but if the connection is successful, we'll still see db.php. So if I go ahead and run this, nothing has changed. Let's go ahead and test that if we made a mistake. So if I put noxtifier, let's make sure that this would error out appropriately. Connection failed, access denied for noxtifier. Okay, so we now know that our connection to the database is functioning. Let's see, what's the next thing we should do? Okay, so next let's go ahead and create a table in the database. To do this, I'm going to go ahead and create a new file in the public directory, and I'm going to call this file setup.php. Now, what I'm going to do in setup.php is I'm just going to create the tables for the database. All started there. So I'm just going to create the tables for the database, but this is going to be quite a dangerous file to leave hanging out in your public directory. So once you're finished development on this site, you should go ahead, or at least once you're finished creating tables for the database, then you should go ahead and delete this setup.php file so that it can't be abused. But for the moment, we're going to put that file in there. And from the index file, we're going to go ahead and copy this require once. Because setup.php is running from the same directory, it is going to have the same pathing, so we can go ahead and include that instruction. And now we're going to create a database table. So we need to put a few basic instructions in here. Actually, I think we should make sure that we have selected the database that we want to use here in db.php. This is where the PHP website comes in very handy, because I forget, I forget the instruction. I think it's MySQL I select DB. There it is. Okay. Yes, so see if there's an example of its usage here. Create a connection, select DB on the connection. Okay, so what we need to do in the database file here is we're going to say con select DB, and the database we're going to select is notifier. Okay, so now we're connecting to the database, checking the connection, and selecting the notifier database. So from within our setup script, we don't need to do that select. What we'll do instead is we'll put together, let's say QRY as the string, and we're going to issue a create table instruction. So we'll do create table, and let's name this table TBL devices, and open bracket. And I'm going to put a period at the end of the line here, which basically means that I can concatenate the next line. So we're going to put in an integer primary key ID field. So this is the name of the field that we're creating. I like to prefix the first three letters with the data type of the field, and this is going to be an integer field. So I'm going to create integer PKID. Now I need the data type of the field, so that's going to be int because it's integer. I want this field to be not null, so I don't want to be able to put in a record without a primary key. And I also want it to have auto increment. So effectively, whenever we enter a new record into our database, it's going to create a new primary key integer number, and it'll automatically increment these numbers from 1. Okay, so let's add a new field here. Let's see. So we'll have int dev type. Now this is going to be, I'm going to use this field as an enumerate. Device type 1, let's get that correct, dev type. So dev type 1, for example, I might say is the Android devices, device type 2 might be iOS devices, and so on. Now I know that this video series we're only aiming at doing the Android device, but as I said, I may extend that into iOS later, so we're going to provision for the possibility of having iOS clients on our application. Again, I want this to be not null. I should always be able to specify which device I'm registering with the system. Then let's see, so whether we're using Google Cloud Messaging or Apple's messaging service, we're going to want to record the key that we get from the API. The key is that thing which uniquely identifies the device, the phone, and the application. So this is going to be a string, because that's what we get back from Google or Apple, and we'll call it push API key. Okay, now the push API key, being a string, is actually a varchar, and I need to check the length of the strings that come back, but let's just say 250 characters will be sufficient for now. We can come back and alter this if not. And again, we want this to be not null. Do we want this to be not null? Maybe we don't, because it is going to be possible for registration from the device to register for an email notification, but not a push notification. So let's go ahead and leave that nullable. Okay, Then we need, let's see, a Boolean indicator of whether or not the user wants to receive push notifications. So this will be bool, and let's say push, and tiny int. Actually, in the MySQL database, a tiny int is the data type used for Boolean variables, even if I were to use the Boolean data type. So let's go ahead and put the tiny int in there. And let's put another one in for bool email. So if the end user wants to receive an email notification, we'll have a bool indicating that that's true. Now, if the end user wants to receive an email notification, we'll also need an email address. So we'll put that in as a string, email address. And again, this is a varchar, and I should probably look up the maximum email address length. But for the moment, I'm just going to say 250 for that. So that's our fields. I think that's all that we need. Yeah, I think that's all that we're going to need. Okay, so having entered all of the fields for this table, I'm going to want to create some keys. So my primary key is going to be the int pkid field. Now what this means is we're going to index on this field, so when we do a select to find data in this table, that's going to be the fastest way to look up data is by its key. But also we're going to potentially link from other tables to this table using a foreign key relationship, and this is the field that we'll use to do that. But we also want to index probably, let's see, I think probably we'll want to put a key field or an index IDX API key, so that's the name of my index, on the string push API key field. Now the reason for that is it's quite possible when we get into our application that we might want to look up the device entry based on the API key. You know, thinking about it, I think we'll always use the PKID. Let's take this key out. Okay, so in that case, this is where we're going to close the table create statement, and that's the statement that we want to run. So now we need the MySQL instruction to execute that query. It's not actually a query; it's a piece of DDL, but we can still use con and the method query. Actually, let's see if connection has a, let's see if it has an execute method. MySQLi execute. It looks like it may. Let's take a look. Statement execute. Connection error, that's a query. So we're preparing a statement, binding parameters. Statement. Okay, we insert into statement. We don't need to bind parameters, so I guess we could just do a prepare. Okay, so this is our query, and let's go ahead and do this. Let's go ahead and do stmt statement equals our connection method prepare. And we'll prepare QRY, and then we'll go ahead and use stmt execute to execute that method, because unlike the query method, we're not expecting results from this this instruction. Okay, so now that we have a create table, we're potentially going to run this setup script time and time again whenever we want to make changes to our database tables while we're developing the application. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a copy of this this entire piece of code here, and I'm going to perform the exact same piece of code, but I'm going to alter the query. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put in here drop table if exists TBL devices. And then again, we're going to do statement prepare and statement execute. So basically in this piece of code, we are going to say If we already have table devices, then go ahead and drop it, because we're going to recreate it. And then in this query, we actually create that table, prepare and execute the call. So if I go ahead and execute that script, which we can do up here from notifier, let's put in setup.php, then we get the db.php come out, because if we go take a look at setup, we are in setup. So I'm executing the instruction, but I'm also using require once on db.php, which is why this is coming out. So if all has gone according to plan, let's log back in under Putty. We'll log in as admin user, and we'll issue MySQL host localhost -u root -p, and so then I'm going to issue use notifier to use the notifier database, and then I think the instruction is show tables, and we can see that we have a table here, TBL devices, that we've created. So this script is going to be able to create the tables of our database for us. Okay, so looking at the time here, we're over the half hour that I wanted to set as a kind of benchmark for these videos. So I'm going to go ahead and finish up with this part 3. Thank you for watching. Next time we'll take a look at how to insert some data into our table, and then we'll begin building the REST class within PHP that's going to return the REST endpoint for that table. So until next time, my name is Craig Chapman. Thanks for watching. See you there.